So recently I've been doing some research into the Spanish saints before the schism, the ones that will be recognized by the Orthodox Church. And some difficult things came up, some pretty confusing things. So I saw that Dyer was going to do a talk on St. Augustine, one of the, you could say, Western saints, I suppose. He was from North Africa, but writing in Latin would normally make him be considered amongst those Western saints. I saw he was doing this talk, so I thought I would send in a super chat to ask him a question on these things that I had come across in the Spanish saints, to see if he could clear it up, and he gave a really excellent answer. So I'm going to show the clip now, and then after the clip, I'm going to certainly not elaborate on his answer, because that's why I'm asking the question, because I didn't know. So I'm going to show his full answer. After that, I'm not going to elaborate on his answer, but rather elaborate on my question. Who are these people that were, that I was asking about, and what are some of the issues, and give more information on that, because these saints, generally speaking, as I've found, I've looked for information on them from the Orthodox side, and I would say that it's comparatively less to other saints. So without further ado, let's see my super chat going in and Jay's answer.
Random ortho, bro, $3. This is another confusing Western saint is Saint Isidore. I have one of his books, so I do have one of Saint Isidore Seville's books over there, and his brother Saint Leander. The Filioque first appears in his writings. I would argue it's in Augustine, so it's not first in Saint Isidore, and in Toledo. Yes, I am aware that it does come up in Toledo. Is it a forgery? No, I would say. I mean, there's a lot of nuance here, because just because somebody says from the Father and the Son, they might be referring to the economia, right? So we have to be careful. We have to be nuanced here. It doesn't always necessarily mean what's defined at Lyons. So I would recommend the Soshensky book, The Filioque, History of a Doctrinal Controversy, and it will go into a lot of the nuances and discuss forged documents, authentic documents, etc. Was there a 6th century interpretation of Filioque? So the letter Marinus says we should grant, if it's authentic, we should grant to the Latins that they just mean the economia. But again, that's at a point in the conversation that you have to know the rest of the story, because it's not dogmatized in Rome until 1274. Okay, so that's the key issue here. And that's why you need to read the book Crisis in Byzantium by Papadakis, because that's when the Palamite synods respond, right, officially from the Orthodox position to what's officially the dogmatic Roman Catholic position. So that's why there's centuries of debates that we have to be aware of.
I asked about Saint Isidore of Seville. So, who was he? He was an extremely important saint, and it's very easy for us today to underestimate, really, until we start to look into his life and his legacy as well, how important he was, because, of course, his impact a lot more limited in the East, because he was writing in Latin. He was from Spain, very far west in Western Europe, so his impact more limited the further east you go. And as for the West, of course, we know historically, and then the Great Schism, and then certain thinkers like Thomas Aquinas, these thinkers become so important, and they in Western Europe, and then they supersede these sort of previous ones. And that's why this maybe Saint I hadn't heard about him until recently, but whenever I started to find out more and more about him, I realized, wow, this guy is one of the most influential of the Western European saints. His writings were spread all over. The most important of which is called the Etymologia, which was like an example of something like an encyclopedia, a massive work in regards to its length and its scope as well. He also wrote the history of the kings of the Goths, the Vandals, and the Suebi, that's the one that I've read. That's the only one of his that I've read. He also is important in regards to the Mozarabic rite. So when we start looking into this figure, there's actually so much to unpack here. In this video, I'm not really going to attempt to do that, because I haven't read so much of his writings, and it would be a massive task to do a full unpacking of all of the things that he wrote and was involved in, his legacy. All I want to get across here is that he's really, really important, and I recommend people to look more at him. I also mentioned Saint Isidore's brother, Saint Leander, also a really, really interesting saint. The Visigothic kings, who were the kings of Spain at this time, they had been following Arianism, and Saint Leander was really instrumental in the conversion of the Visigothic kings to Orthodox Christianity. They rejected they rejected Arianism and adopted Orthodoxy. The two kings in particular, King Hermangild and King Recared. Curious thing about St. Leander is that at one point, because of his opposition to Arianism, he was exiled and went to Constantinople, which I mentioned just to point out, this journey was not a difficult thing or like an impossible thing. Maybe a common misconception that in those sort of early centuries of Christianity, that it was something difficult or really unusual, practically impossible to travel from Western Europe to Eastern Europe or to Constantinople. There's countless examples of this in the lives of saints, but also, all kinds of evidence to show that journey was not so unusual. And he was there for a few years before he returned to Spain. Saint Leander, and this story that I've just told of the conversion of the Visigothic kings after his return to Constantinople, is really important in the other thing that I mentioned in the super chat, the Third Council of Toledo. And this is the thing that when I was reading, I came across and went, this is difficult for me to understand this from the Orthodox perspective. There's so much to talk about here that, again, I'm not going to do a full breakdown of the Third Council of Toledo. I haven't researched it enough to do that, but also this is a huge topic, and what I'm just trying to achieve in this video really is to give these sort of basic facts, maybe encourage other people to look more at this, and I myself will be doing that as well in the future. So the difficult thing and the main point to take from the Third Council of Toledo is that here we see the Filioque actually inside, really, or added to the Nicene Creed. So this is obvious for anyone who has anyone Orthodox, basic understanding of Orthodoxy, why this was kind of strange to see this, that, the council is presided over by Saint Leander. Saint Leander is recognized as a saint in the Orthodox Church, and yet this thing, the first example of this is in this council, which he's presiding over. This becomes one of the big issues between Rome and Constantinople, and eventually leads to the Great Schism. The Filioque, especially kind of like inside the creed, was one of the main issues leading to that split. If you remember back to the clip with Jay there, this is something that I messed this up because with the super chats, there's like a limited character count, and so I've rewritten because I went over the character count, so I rewrote it a few times to try and pack in all the information I wanted to get across. And in the end, when he read it out, I realized I'd left out this information because at first he was like. Oh, because it was written like that. That the Filioque first appears in the writings of Saint Isidore. I think I said what I was trying to say was what I meant to say was the first time it's inside, you see it kind of like inside or added to the creed, is at the Third Council of Toledo, and also the fact that it's in the writings of Saint Isidore. As well. So that's what I meant by that's what I meant to say rather. So to understand this, what Jay recommended was a book called The Filioque: History of a Doctrinal Controversy by Szysensky. I've not read it, of course, but I definitely will be looking out for that one now. He also recommended The Letter to Marinus, which I hadn't heard of this, but I looked it up and see that that's a letter sent to someone called Marinus by St. Maximus the Confessor. And also, finally, a book called Crisis in Byzantium by Papadakis. Now I'm going to talk about things that were not directly in my question, but are sort of side issues here, or things that are also relevant. For example, we talked about Saint Isidore and Saint Leander, who were brothers. They actually also had a third brother, who was called Saint Fulgentius. He was the bishop of a city called Écija, which is close to Seville. And this remarkable family also had a sister called Saint Florentina, and she in the same city of Écija, she was the abbess of a nunnery. Collectively, they're known as Los Cuatro Santos in Spanish, which means the four saints. And this touches upon one of the reasons that this topic is especially interesting to me personally, because they're especially associated with these two cities, Seville, where two of the brothers were the bishop of Seville, and Écija, where one was the bishop there and the sister had the nunnery. But they were not born in either of these two cities, but rather they were born in a city on the south coast called Cartagena. And I actually live in Cartagena, and I'm making this video from Cartagena. And it's one of the most noteworthy facts about the city is that it was the birthplace of these four very special saints, and that is actually really how I became introduced to them and all of the topics discussed in this video. Because I was looking into the history of the city to find out if there were saints connected to the city, this sort of Christian history, and that's how I found out about them initially. The other city that's important to mention is Toledo, because that obviously was the location of the Third Council of Toledo, which if you haven't read Spanish history, you might not realize how important that city was, because that was the capital, and was the capital for much longer than Madrid has been. Toledo is actually very close to Madrid, but the movement of the capital and being this sort of central city from Toledo to Madrid is actually a really recent development. That began only really in the modern era, that movement, and prior to that, Toledo had been the capital going back to the 6th century in this Visigothic period. and was a super important city until way later, and it sort of not being this central city, not being the capital city, and that sort of the prestige, and also the being the most dense population, the movement of that from Toledo to Madrid is much more recent, and there's a lot of various reasons for that. But I don't want to get into all of that now. But it's worth pointing out, maybe just to make clear, that these councils of Toledo, if you haven't heard of Toledo before, you might mistakenly think that they were maybe obscure, whereas on the contrary, this was a capital city of a massive Western kingdom. So the councils of Toledo were not something kind of obscure happening in the corner of some, like, or in the countryside or something like that. That was the capital in those days. It's a really beautiful city. I mentioned in a previous video, which was about the Hanging Crowns, that I lived in Madrid, and as I pointed out, Toledo is very close to Madrid. So while I was living in Madrid, I visited Toledo twice. Another thing that is definitely worth mentioning in all of this is the Pseudo-Isidorian decretals, which are really famous. That, like, most people are gonna know about this if they've studied papal supremacy, and where that came from. And these are well-known forgeries, and even from the Vatican now, that they've conceded the fact that these are forgeries. Jay has actually spoken about this, the Pseudo-Isidorian decretals, in quite a lot of detail with Snek and George. So I'll try to remember to put the link to that in the description. It was a video that was titled Fatima, Forgeries, Frauds and Fantasies. Dyer talking with Snek and George, and a large section of that was on the Pseudo-Isidorian decretals. So many people might be aware of that and not actually realize, yes, that you might tell by the name, Pseudo-Isidorian decretals. Yeah, it's referring to this Saint Isidore. It was his name that they put on those forgeries. As I mentioned earlier, this is a really important saint. Kind of like someone considered this kind of like authority figure. Putting his name carried a lot of weight, and as I pointed out, as other thinkers kind of become more famous later on, we can sort of miss that or underestimate how big his name, how important his name was in previous centuries. And this is why, really, they make this forgery, and they're thinking, who put a name on this that will give this document as much authority as possible, and they put the name Saint Isidore, and it was not written by him. Like I said, that's not just an orthodox position. Everyone accepts that these are forgeries now. Even the Vatican itself has conceded that, and you can check out that video and see Jay, Snek and George talking about that in a lot more detail. So this is kind of interesting, because this was part of my question to Jay in the super chat. There was, about this. We see Saint Isidore, Saint Leander, and the Filioque coming up like this. Now I asked Jay the question because I don't know the answer. He directed me to the books. Like, he didn't really say 100%. I don't know if there's an orthodox position on this. Is this forged? Especially the detail of the Filioque being put into the creed in the Third Council of Toledo. Is this forged? I'm gonna check out those books, and I'm not saying what I think here, and I don't mean to speculate either side on that. But you you can't say that it's not relevant that there's a really, really high profile, notable example of Saint Isidore's name being used in forgeries. That is worth mentioning. The fact that there's a precedent here for his name being misused in this way. So definitely just an interesting talking point to add in there. Also, Jay has done a great talk also with Snek on the Jesuits, and not irrelevant. It's not so specific, but more just in general. The Jesuits started in Spain, and so and I assume most people know that the Jesuits and this kind of thing of like forgeries and falsified documents and stuff like that is sort of a speciality of the Jesuits, and the fact that they started in Spain, it can't be totally irrelevant here when we're talking about these things. Now, when I look into, it could be the case, absolutely, that these things, that is how it was. And as Jay pointed out, and the main thing here is that there's nuance to this. It's not like from the Orthodox position, these have to be forgeries, otherwise, we'll be challenged by that. Because as Jay pointed out, this doctrine kind of develops over time. This is a super early example of its appearance. But when we're talking about Spain, this is important to keep in mind. Pseudo-Isidorian decretals and the Jesuits start in Spain. So you can't dismiss that or try the put that to the side. That's gonna be something that you have to keep in mind all the time when you're looking at Spanish documents, really. And like I said, yeah, Jay also did another talk about the Jesuits. So actually, Jay's done some really good stuff on Spain. I didn't realize that at first, but now I realize these two talks with Snek, they cover a lot that is relevant specifically to Spain. And so I'll link the two of those talks in the description. So in summary, there's so many amazing things that are connected with these saints. There's the lives of Saint Isidore, Saint Leander, Saint Fulgentius, Saint Florentina. Their life stories in themselves are interesting. But also we have so much writings from Saint Isidore, a lot of writings that you can spend a lot of time going through those. Then they interconnect with the kings. They convert these Visigothic kings to orthodoxy, and so you can also huge field of research at looking at this Visigothic history. From when you're getting into the kings, you're sort of broadening yourself out into a general overview of Spanish history, really, this sort of political military history. We also then have the councils of Toledo, which the key one and the one I've mentioned each time here is the third council. So that means there's councils preceding that. There's also councils of Toledo before and after the third. The third council of Toledo was not the first council of Toledo. It also was not the last council of Toledo. So to understand it, for sure, understanding what came before and after is going to be relevant. Another huge sort of field of research opens there. There's also then, as Jay pointed out, you can't really just pick out one moment that the Filioque mentioned. that's a huge other subject in itself, the Filioque, which becomes very important here. But understanding that more broadly, you're going to be able to understand it more in this specific context of it appearing in the writings of Saint Isidore, it appearing in the Third Council of Toledo. Then, like I pointed out as well, huge thing opens up with the Mozarabic rite, which Saint Isidore was important in its development. So in total, massive number of things to look into there, and you scratch the surface in this area, and it opens up in so many different directions. On this channel, of course, I've mostly been covering the Irish saints, but I'm really interested in the Spanish saints. Obviously, I've mentioned that I have lived in Spain, and even currently, I'm living in Spain. And secondly, it is really interesting, I think, for anyone. And like I just mentioned, it opens up into so many other interesting topics. This also is why my channel name, it's Irish Orthodoxa. That Orthodoxa is the way to say Orthodox in the Spanish language. So from the beginning, I have had this at the back of my mind that eventually I would be talking about the Spanish saints as well. And last words, I'd just like to say thanks to Jay for giving me a great answer there, and recommend really the super chats to other people. I think this is a really cool feature. I was never really into watching streams. I'd never even heard of Streamlabs or super chats before listening to some of Jay's videos, and at first I was like, what is this thing? And but eventually I wanted to ask him a question, and this isn't the very first time I used it. So I used it before for something else, to send him a movie recommendation actually. And for someone totally new to it, it actually is really easy. So if you haven't used that feature before, I would recommend it, because if you just click on the links, normally it's in the description whenever he's doing a stream, or one of the mods puts the Streamlabs link into the live chat, and if you just click on that, all you do is you make a Streamlabs profile, and you can send it with credit card or PayPal, and it actually works really easily, and he does it like you've probably seen it before. He reads it out at the end, so it works really well, very smoothly, and I think it's a really great feature, and a good way to support his streams. There's different ways you can do, like the Rockfin or the website, or different ways, but the super chats is a really great way. I really like it because there's things like this that I think of, that it's really good to be able to ask someone who is really knowledgeable on these subjects. And in general, I would just say, while I'm talking about Jay, thanks in general, for there's so many videos that I've seen, like his debates, I think are excellent. A lot of these streams are really great. Well, that's all. So I see this is coming around the 30-minute mark, which is just I think an insight in how interesting all this stuff is, because for the most part I've just given a summary of some of the main issues here, and yet it's still taken that long. So it shows you how much there is to look at in all of these topics, and they all interconnect. Really interesting stuff. So I think the Spanish saints, it's a very fruitful field for further study. Alright, that's all. Thanks for watching.